Hello everybody, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and it is the weekend. At least as of the time I'm recording this, it is the weekend. That means it is time for another recap of the events in the world of game development. This is actually week 24 of doing this for the week ending May the 1st, 2016. And let's jump right in with what happened this week. Now, this didn't really happen. This was more of one of those things where some numbers were made available to me, and they're very interesting. You've probably heard of Indiepocalypse. Basically, it's... let's go with the nice way of saying it. Clickbaiting. It's the way that news sites are trying to get people to come in and read their stories about basically nothing. And they're trying to say that there's a huge influx of developers into the indie space. It's completely destroyed the market. Nobody's making any money, and it's the end of the world, and oh my, oh my, oh my. It happens with every single type of boom there ever is. It happened with iOS. It happened with gold rushes back in the 1800s. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen every time. It's sort of a Chicken Little type story. However, there is an element of truth to it. Sales are down. There was this neat, there's this Twitter stream called Steam Spy, which basically follows and tracks sales on Steam. And they just released some data that's kind of interesting. Basically, it shows that in April of 2015, there were 1,352 games in the store. They made a total of $157 million, whereas in April 2016, there were $128 million in sales for 2,099 games. And it's easy to look at that number and go, oh my god, that's 20% decline in revenue. This is not good. And you can, draw conclusions from it however you wish. However, that is very lazy journalism, and don't do that, because a short while later, they released this other piece of information. And this actually shows all game sales. Not just the indie space, but all game sales in general. And what you'll see here is in April of 2015, there was $550 million in sales, whereas in April of 2016, there are $365 in sales, a drop of 37%. So if you look at that, so this is including AAA titles, A titles, etc., along with indie titles. So what that tells us is that indie sales are actually doing better than AAA sales as a segment of the market. So no, the indie market is not exploding. No, the sky isn't falling Chicken Little. However, sales are down across the board. And that's obviously not a good thing. Gaming is somewhat in decline. However, this is 1 month, and it kind of is just a very small segment of data. So there's not really a lot you can extrapolate from it. But what you can pretty conclusively look at is say, well, you know what? As compared to the rest of the segment, indie games are actually still doing pretty good. All right, so moving on to real actual news. Xamarin had their annual developer conference this week, Xamarin Evolve, and as part of it, they announced new features of Xamarin. Now, Xamarin is now free and part of Visual Studio, even the community version. So the free version of Community now has the Xamarin technologies built in. And two new features they just got are iOS Simulator Remoting, which enables you to run the Mac simulator remotely from your Windows box, which is nice. You still need a Mac in the mix, but you don't need to have a 2PC or a double deployment or anything like that. There's also USB remoting, which makes it possible to deploy and debug from Visual Studio on an iOS device, cutting out the middleman. Now, unfortunately, you're still going to need a Mac to sign your code, but it is making the development process a whole lot faster for those Windows-only developers. So those are really two new, very cool features. And if you want access to them, you have to go to the alpha release channel inside of Visual Studio. But those are available today. They also announced Xamarin Studio 6, which used to be mono-developed. And there was really interesting wording in their announcement for Xamarin Studio 6 is they just used macOS, no mention of Windows at all. And I was kind of curious when they became part of Microsoft and under the Visual Studio fold, if they were going to still push Xamarin Studio as a Windows solution. And from the wording they're using, they're obviously not. They're looking at this as the development tools for Mac only, and I guess Linux only. So it seems like they're de-emphasizing Xamarin Studio on Windows, which makes sense. It really honestly doesn't compete with Visual Studio, even if Visual Studio is starting to get a little on the bloated side. But they just released version 6, so if you're a Mac or a Linux developer, there is now a new dark theme, Roslyn support, which is the Microsoft's open source .NET compiler, new project model with better MS Build integration, F# support, which is nice, including even their own Xamarin Forms libraries, Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android library improvements, and workbooks. Workbooks is kind of a cool concept. It's basically like a coding sandbox. So you can do a REPL or read, evaluate, print loop, which is a way of basically typing code to the command line and interacting with it live. Well, Workbooks is kind of going to take that same basic approach. So that's cool to see here. Now, next up, we have a pair of new releases. We've got, of course, the weekly release of Unreal and the weekly release of Unity. The Unreal release is actually preview release, so this is, features coming soon. Obviously, expect some more bugs to be in. These are brand new preview releases. The name is well earned, but there's some cool stuff in this release. There's actually quite a bit in it. I have to give them credit. They're improving Unreal Engine at a staggeringly good rate. But the biggest new addition is the sequencer. Sequencer is a non-linear editor, which means basically if we're bringing disparate things together, sound effects, animations, etc., so you can make movies or scripts or whatever out of it. So you'd often use this for in-engine cutscenes or cinematics, etc. But they're also aiming it for film, TV, and previs work as well. So that's brand new functionality that's being added, and it's got several different features. New cinematics features, platform updates, PS4 updates, VR updates, miscellaneous framework updates, rendering updates, blueprint updates, mobile updates. So basically a lot of small improvements across the board, but the biggest thing there is definitely going to be that sequencer. And so if you're looking at making in-game cutscenes, this should probably be some really cool news for you. And as I mentioned also, Unity also released a patch. Now, Unity's patch is 5.3.4p5. It is just fixes for the most part. Should be safe to go ahead and add it. They updated the Oculus VR API, which also removed the requirement for the OVR plugin. But otherwise, this is an entirely fixed-related release. Now, another game engine out there, Wave Engine, which I've actually got an article on Gamefromscratch covered right here. In a closer look at Wave Engine. Well, Wave Engine is a C# powered cross-platform game engine, and they just announced a developer contest with up to $30,000 in pricing. The top prize is $15,000 USD. The stipulations are you have to publish your game by, they suggest September the 1st, but the judging is on September 31st, or the contest closes September 31st, and your game needs to be deployed to the Windows 10 store. That's about it. If you have a game in development, you're using Wave Engine, publish it to the Windows 10 store, submit it to them so that they know that it was made in Wave Engine, and you could win one of these three prizes. So the first prize is $15,000, second prize is $8,000, third prize is $5,000, fourth prize is $2,000. So if you're working with Wave Engine, definitely check this out. If you're considering Wave Engine, well, this might be a good incentive to go ahead and give it a shot. And as I said earlier, if you're interested, I have already done a closer look at series covering Wave Engine. It's a cool engine, and since I did this, I actually took some of my feedback to mind, so the engine has been refined a bit. So a few of my complaints have actually been rectified directly. So they're a nice, responsive company. I appreciate them for that. And I do intend to check out Wave Engine again in the future to see how much it has improved. Now, another game engine news piece, Lumberyard was released, 1.2. It's actually a beta release, but they don't actually announce their full releases, so we'll call this 1.2 release and end there. And they've actually done a pretty impressive amount of stuff in a short period of time. It was just March that they released 1.1, and I think it was just February. Yeah, February that Lumberyard was released in the first place. Now, if you're interested, I've actually done a quick hands-on with Lumberyard, not really in detail, but you can have an idea of what's included by jumping into here. I've also done a video covering it that'll be available from the same link. Lumberyard is essentially Amazon's fork of CryEngine from about almost a year back. So they got a source code license for CryEngine. You can get full source code available. And the only real requirement is if you have a server component on your end, you have to use Amazon services or host them yourself. So that is where Amazon is making their money off this. They want you to use their cloud service like EC2, S3, etc. So if you are using cloud-based services, you either have to roll your own, run your own servers, or use Amazon servers. Otherwise, it is basically a full source code available license of CryEngine that Amazon has been slowly improving and adding functionality to. And what did they add? Well, in 1.2, they added a new audio tutorial integrating the Weiss audio, extended mobile support. This is probably the biggie. When it launched, there was no mobile support at all. In 1.1, they added some very tentative support. Basically, Android in the form of NVIDIA Shield, which all of 9 people own, and the very, very, very newest iOS platforms. Well, in this release, they've added a couple more. So basically, it's up to the iPhone 6 series, the Air 2, and the iPad Pro. So still pretty much the cutting edge of iPad releases, but And then they've expanded the Android out to include the Note 5 and the Nexus 6 as supported devices. Obviously, in time, expected to see a more broad release across both of those. They added network binding for components, enabling you to do cross-network synchronization of component data. They improved the particle editor, including adding GPU particle rendering, advanced playback controls, a gradient editor, color picker, and more. And added a UI animation system that enables you to animate certain properties of UI components. So, and then the fixes. And the fixes go on and on and on and on and on. And okay, I'll stop now. Lots of fixes. So they're doing a very impressive job of improving on it. And this has probably been one of the things that CryEngine really sucked at. They were kind of slow for releasing new releases. They kind of had terrible documentation, terrible community, terrible support. So Lumberyard seems to definitely be improving that. Now, the upgrade process did seem to be a full reinstall, which kind of sucked, especially because their installer is not a trivial process. But still, definitely nice to see the quick progress coming from the Amazon team on Lumberyard. Be interesting to see where this engine ends up. And then our final piece of news, we have Texture Packer. Texture Packer is a cool little program capable of packing your sprites into sprite sheets in various forms, different optimizations, different things. I featured it a number of times on Gamefromscratch. They just released a new version, 4.2. Now, Texture Packer is available both free version with stripped out functionality, so you can't do certain file formats. You're limited in how you can pack your textures, etc. But it's still very useful in its free form. And then there is a commercial form with all of the features available for around $40 US. This new release adds Ping 8 support. So index pings, which use only 256 bytes for, so 256 bits for colors, so it greatly reduces the amount of colors down. Ironically, what's old is new. This is like going back to the old PCX file formats. An improved help system, improved user interface for new users. There's basically a minimal mode if you want. That's easier to work with. A sprite sheet animation previewer that you can see right here. Support for ETC2, PVR-TC2, DXT1, and DXT5 compression formats. User interface cleanups and several fixes, including all data formats are now using the UTF-8 instead of native text encoding, so that should make cross-platform versions better to work with and more consistent in how they handle things. So that was it for this week in game development. Once again, we do this every single week on top of tutorials, game engine reviews, you name it. So if you're interested in the latest in game dev news, tutorials, and reviews, please be sure to subscribe. New content comes out all week long. Hope you enjoyed that. See y'all later. Goodbye.